fine, Krista.
The Independent National Electoral Commission declared Bola Ahmed Tinubu as the winner of the 2023 presidential election, marking the end of arguably the most important and hotly contested presidential election Nigeria has seen in 50 years. The presidential race was as close as expected. Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the winning candidate, accumulated 8.8 million votes, just 1.8 million votes ahead of Atiku Abubakar in second, and 2.7 million votes more than Peter Obi. In contrast, President Muhammad Buhari won the 2019 election by nearly 4 million votes more than his opponents. Furthermore, each of the top 3 candidates won 12 states, showing how split voter preferences are across Nigeria. One clear edge the APC candidate can boast of is that he secured at least 25% of the vote in 29 states, making him the most popular candidate. Meanwhile, although Peter Obi came within 1 million votes of Atiku Abubakar, he reached 25% of the poll in fewer states, 16 versus 21, suggesting his popularity was slightly more concentrated. The low turnout figure is a surprise, given the consensus view that Nigerians were more engaged in the 2023 general elections. This view was buttressed by INEC, confirming that more than 10 million Nigerians registered to vote for the first time ahead of 2023 elections. A simple explanation would be that voter apathy ultimately ruled supreme in Nigeria. Put together, one could argue that a lot more Nigerians tried to vote than those that succeeded. Whatever the reasons behind this low turnout, the problem is accentuated in southern states, as the bottom 5 states for the turnout are all in the south, while 4 of the top 5 states for turnout are in the north. These and other issues are what we shall review on Nigeria today. I am your carrier, Clinton. Good to be with you again. With me is Professor Jide Adibe, political scientist. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Also joining us is our own Jide Uju, a public affairs analyst. Good to have you with us, sir.
A pleasure. Good evening, Nigerians.
I'll start with you, Jide. You have, when I did introduction, a lot of Nigerians were eager to vote. A lot more people came out. But then the turnout of voter was low. Are you surprised? Are you more surprised or less surprised, and why?
Well, it's surprising to everybody, but also not completely a surprise. There were issues. People were already very angry with the system, the introduction of the currency and the cash crunch, fuel scarcity. And then on top of this was the fact, as you rightly mentioned, several people tried to vote and were not successful. Where I live, and that's not a very hidden place, as late as 11 p.m., people were still there at the polling units. So a combination of the logistical challenges as well as the frustrations and voter suppression in some areas, fear of violence in others, combined to, depress the number of people that would otherwise have exercised their franchise. Again, the length of time, people having to spend 8 hours, 9 hours just to exercise their franchise can be very frustrating. Okay, there were also instances where several places actually where the pollings were not concluded and they were supposed to conclude the following day and INEC officials never showed up. So who knows? I'm not sure what was published was actually the final tally, but at least in the wisdom of INEC, the margin between the Bola Ahmed Tinubu and others, they must have considered sufficiently large enough that, even with the outstanding votes to be counted, that it wouldn't have made any difference in the outcome.
Now, Jide, you had what you just said there. We had 10 more million Nigerians registering for the first time. We had 87, a little bit above 87 million Nigerians that collected their PVC, yet we had 29% that voted. What is your perspective on this?
Like Professor Adibe has said, it's not completely strange to me as somebody who follows the political development in Nigeria. And I've predicted this even before the polls, that given the very challenging environment under which this election was postponed, was held rather, that it will be a miracle for us to have a huge voter turnout. Let me just expand on what Prof said. You have cash crunch for close to 2 months before the election. People are asking themselves, what is the worth of my vote if this is what I bring upon myself? 8 years of President Buhari's administration, whether we like it or not, has not sufficiently increased what we call the standard of living of average Nigerians. So you have more people experiencing high cost of living than high standard of living. I've been here several times talking about fuel scarcity in FCT and major Nigerian cities, where it's like a camel passing through the eye of the needle to even get the product, and we have to rely heavily on the black marketers who sells at cutthroat prices. And this worsened ahead of the election, so much so that even the INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, was so concerned weeks to the election, about 2-3 weeks to the election, that he had to make an official visit to the GMD of NNPCL, Mele Kyari, as well as the CBN governor, that if both of them does not help in finding lasting solution to the twin problem of fuel scarcity and naira scarcity, is going to impact negatively on the conduct of election. Yes, INEC eventually got the naira it needed from CBN governor, but what about you and I? Up to today, I can't accept. I wanted to use a POS earlier today, and the guy was telling me 4,000 on 10,000 naira. So people's mood was not just, their enthusiasm has been dampened by lack of dividends of democracy. So situation, and this percolates across the country at the national and subnational level. People are not seeing the dividends, so they are asking themselves, of what benefit is my vote going to be? Then, of course, the mounting challenges, the late commencement of... I happen to have observed the election under the platform of Nigerian Women Trust Fund, and I was deployed to Abuja Municipal, and on the eve of election, we went around to some registration area centers. On the day of election, I observed the election along the Maraba, Yanya, Karu axis. And what I saw is quite a number of people who wants to vote. But unfortunately, INEC officials did not arrive on time. For many of them, the earliest place we saw was INEC officials arriving at 8:30 when they should have commenced the accreditation and voting. Because the regulation says you come 7:30, 1 hour before the polls, so that you use 1 hour to set up, and by 8:30 you start processing voters. So that challenge was there. Of course, if you go by Yaga Africa, Nigeria Women Trust Fund, National Situation Room report, CDD reports, all of them pointed that there was widespread late commencement of polls. That is a disincentive because it has implication. It set off a chain reaction that in many places where elections should have been held during the day, situations where you now start election by 11, 12 noon, people now have to wait till late in the day to cast their ballot. So, and what I also saw as an accredited observer in this election was that many people who has purportedly been moved from congested polling units to less congested polling units were finding it difficult to locate their new polling units. So many of them even accosted me and said, "Oga, please, where is this?" They received the INEC notification via SMS, just like I did receive. But where exactly is that new polling unit? They couldn't. So they were roaming about like headless chicken. Meanwhile, there is also the frustration of lockdown. The military and the police ensured lockdown effectiveness, at least in FCT, where I observe election. As we were going towards Maraba Yanya axis, we saw a lot of people wanting to drive to city centers to come and vote. Purportedly, they registered close to where they work. Unfortunately, they were not allowed to drive in because of the enforcement of the lockdown. And this has always been counterproductive. Once you lock down, people cannot trek long distances, and there are no public vehicles, there are no motorbikes, there are no tricycles operating to ease the movement of the people to enable them to cast their ballot. So this also impacted. But largely, it's also the limited voting hours Nigeria has. We have 6 hours. I have observed the election in US, in Egypt, in Uganda, and in Ghana. And in Egypt, election holds for 12 hours, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. In Kenya, election holds for 12 hours, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. But in Nigeria, election holds for 6 hours, 8:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. So, coupled with lockdown, you have already locked people down. Then you shrink the time that they can also vote. So, you've locked down, and then people cannot also find their polling unit on time. The INEC officials were not readily available. They didn't come on time. And then the hours, because if it were to be 12 hours, much of the congestion you say would not have been there. People would have taken their time to say, okay, I still have till 7 p.m. or 6 p.m. So there's no need, facing this hectic crowd. Let me go return later. Because in US, you'll be surprised that the election even hold on work day. No public holiday, no. So on your way to work, you can go cast your ballot. On your way back from work, you can go cast your ballot. Even after you come back from work, you can still walk down to cast your ballot because of the wide. And on top of everything, there are about 5 different group of there are different voting opportunities that have been denied in Nigeria over the time. Let me quickly highlight them. There is no provision for early voting. If there is a provision for early voting, I will have voted, because I will have voted earlier, maybe a week earlier than the day of election. That's what I observed in Ghana in 2008. There is provision for early voting. So if you are going to be election officials, you will have voted at a designated polling unit. Just that the votes will not be counted until the day of the general election. So there's no provision like that. There's no provision for prisoners to vote. In Kenya, in August 2022, prisoners voted. There is no provision for out-of-country voting, or what is called diaspora voting. In Kenya, 2022, August 2022 election, Kenyans in 12 different countries voted in that election. But only Nigerians living within Nigeria are allowed to vote here. So when you look at this, then there is no provision also for what is it called? So I mean, in US there is what is called mail-in ballots. You can mail your, but assuming we don't even want to go through the mail-in ballot, if there is provision for out-of-country voting, look at the number of Nigerians, millions of Nigerians living abroad, who are remitting a lot of resources back to Nigeria. They have been shut out completely. So these are things that we have missed that should have enabled us to have very huge voter turnout.
Thank you very much. Let's take a break now and go to the street to get what some Nigerians are saying as a reason for the low turnout, as put together by our correspondent, Abdul Wahab Suleiman.
Even from the statistics from INEC itself, the number of registered voters, there's a discrepancy, there's a level of difference, there's a high level of difference from the voters they have been recording in previous elections to the one that was registered also. So I just pray that same turnout would also see it in the election that's to come of the governorship elections and stuff like that.
It was quite impressive, especially the youth. I've never seen it like this before. You know, the awareness, the involvement, the tenacity, the way people were pushing. I myself, I spoke to virtually everybody, you know, getting people involved, both on the rage. Everybody knew that something is happening.
Very impressive. I think Nigeria is happy. Very, very impressive compared to the previous years. All tribe, very, very impressive. The turnout is okay. And the election is fantastic. It's amazing.
Yeah, that the election this time is going to be free and fair, based on the assurance by the INEC. And that was why people have confidence, and people turn out in mass to come out and vote.
Yes, I believe in one country. We should all be united. So all this, these days, especially on social media, there is a lot of tribalism. This tribe is not supporting this tribe. I don't believe election should be about tribe or religion. I believe that we are Nigerian first before we are any tribe. So let Nigeria just live.
This election, my effort can never be a waste. And the effort I made was that I prayed that let the true leader emerge and let him rule.
Welcome back. It is in Nigeria. Today we are reviewing the voters' turnout in the 2023 Presidential and National Assembly elections. My guests are still Professor Jide Ofo Adidi and Jide Ojo. Professor, you heard the reactions of people there. And let me ask, with the lapses we experienced in this election, with the lapses from the INEC and some of the challenges he mentioned, are we likely to see this huge turnout in the governorship election that is coming up on the 11th of March?
I think it may depend again on, it will vary from area to area. Mm-hmm. In some areas where the candidate is supported at the presidential level maybe might be victorious, there may be more enthusiasm for people to come out and support the governorship and House of Assembly elections. In other areas where the outcome was not favorable, or at least the announced result by INEC was not what some people expected, you are likely to see a suppression of enthusiasm to come out to vote. I had actually expected that in the northern part, in some parts of the country, that at the presidential level, that the places I projected were likely to have apathy. Were in the northwest, and some areas that you can argue did not have any horse in the race, in the presidential race. Because the surprise for me was, if you look at the southwest, the southeast, and at least Adamawa and Kano, you can say yes, they have horses in the race, and that animated a number of voters. And you could see it both in online and offline conversations. People were enthusiastic. The conversations were robust, sometimes cantankerous, but they're all part of the whole process of, you build up anxieties and expectations. So people are still waiting. I'm particularly waiting until the entire process runs out, because, some people are saying there was a massive turnout, but they don't seem to be reflected in the figures. If you look at Lagos, close to 7 million people registered, over 6 million picked their PVC, only 1.3 million voted. That's astonishing, about 25% or even less. But then you go to Sokoto, the places you will think that because they did not have any horse in the race, so to say, you still see relatively higher turnouts, almost in keeping with the traditional trends. So the governorship and the House, of course, some might come out to make a statement. I expect a place like Lagos to get improved turnout because you can argue that the stakes are high for some people that lost faith. They either lost faith during the presidential election or needed to make a statement. And then in places like some other parts of the country where there was a big, strong conviction that the candidate they backed, was cheated out of the race. I mean, allegedly cheated out. We don't have any evidence to anything now. You can see that the same apathy of will my vote make any difference? Okay, the same belief that hitherto dogged our political ecosystem that, well, the politicians will always anoint whoever they want, and that the winner is already determined a priori. So I believe in some places the voter apathy will be very high. And you saw, for example, in Kaduna, what happened. The governor himself complained, and that one we could understand, the idea that Northwest was set in Nigerian mode of thinking of identity construction, that they did not have any horse in the race. So it's going to vary.
Okay. Now, Jide, a lot of persons, just like you rightly said, a lot of persons were saying the turnout was massively impressive. As a matter of fact, even Aliko Dangote said the turnout was very impressive. He said, since he's been voting since 1999, this time around he has seen much more than the usual. Even though Konjo-Iweala came out to say, the largest you've seen in years. Now, but it's like the comments they are making is contradicting what we are saying. 29% of what actually stood out for you in this election?
What stood out for me is the participatory way, the very sophisticated way in which people voted. While in a number of places people did bandwagon voting, so top to bottom, they don't want to know who is standing elections. Luckily, there are no pictures of candidates, so it's just this party. So you see, let me be more specific. Obedient movement was able to galvanize a lot of youth and a lot of people to turn out to vote. Now, even people who do not have resources to run a robust campaign latched on to that movement to emerge victorious. I mean, I don't know how far that's true, but maybe I said, maybe Prof. There was a guy in FCT who possibly was said to be having a siesta only for him to be called that he's leading in the election, and then he ran down, and then he turned out that he actually won. Then there is one guy who's said to be Okada rider vigilante. Okay, the Okada rider is Kaduna. There is one in the Enugu where they say the man is a vigilante and bus driver, and then he just maybe they were looking for who to contest just to, and then they put his name, and then because of the movement, he doesn't have the money, but I saw the picture, him victorious. So for that, I would say in the Southeast, the Labour Party movement will, to a very large extent, maintain momentum. But like Prof said, it's going to be, there will be zonal peculiarities and state peculiarities. So you find out that where the contest is such that a party lost in the last election, maybe due to the movement that, for instance, Peter Obi represented, now that he didn't emerge victorious, is likely going to have a side effect, negative side effect, on those who joined in that movement for the belief that they are voting for a new president, and so they need to win as many states as they can. Now that that has become a deja vu, you are likely going to see people voting on the basis of local politics.
Local politics.
Local politics will
Thank you.
become now the reference point.
Thank you
so
very much.
it's not going to be a universal one way, but zonal and state peculiarities will apply.
Thank you
but
very
we pray
much.
for a peaceful election.
Yes. Thank you so much. There's so much to talk about, but we'll have to stop here for today. But before we go, we want to thank our guest, Professor Jide for Adibe, political scientist. We appreciate your insights and your contributions.
Thank you.
Also, Jide Uju, a public affairs analyst. Thank you very much for coming. And to our viewer, thank you very much for always being there. Don't forget, Nigeria Today air weekdays at 7:30 p.m. on NTA News 24. You can watch these and other episodes on www.youtube.com/NTA News 24 Hub. Once again, thank you for watching. I am your carrier, Clinton. See you next time.